Welcome to Girlfriend's Bible Study, a live Bible study with Connie and friends. Each week, Connie and her girlfriends engage in a lively conversation as they read and study scripture. So grab a pen, your journal, and your best friend and enjoy this enlightening Bible study.
Today, we are talking about miracles in the Bible and in the modern day world. And this conversation was prompted by a recent conversation that I had with a loved one about whether or not there are still modern day miracles happening. And of course, my belief is that there are. And many people, even doctors, would say that there are. And so I did a little research on miracles, and I just want to share a little bit about that with you before I read a few scriptures. So the definition of a miracle is an extraordinary event manifesting divine intervention in human affairs. An extraordinary event manifesting divine intervention in human affairs. And when you look at the Bible, as well as in modern day, the types of miracles that are frequently listed are deliverance from imminent danger, cure of illness or faith healings, provision of plenty to the needy, control over nature, exorcisms, resurrections, punishments, visions, and then there's some minor random miracles, and I'm going to read one of those as well today in the Bible, which is really interesting. So if you think about deliverance from imminent danger, cure of illness or faith healings, even provision of food or plenty to the needy, and definitely control over nature, there's some things that you can definitely see in the current day, in the modern day world as well. And so one of the things that I thought about is when we read about miracles in the Bible, of course, we're reading about them as historic events. And the people who have written about them are often writing about them as historic events. They're not necessarily writing real time. It's not like, imagining a news camera being there and being able to, show it with the news camera and all of that. It's not that way. So it's interesting when we read about them, some of the things that they list as miracles, they're talking about in hindsight. And there are some things that we could also talk about in hindsight as a miracle. So I just want to mention that, and you'll understand why I mention that in just one moment. I'm going to read the kind of random miracle first, the minor random miracle, and I'm going to make that relevant to one of the things that we deal with in 2 Kings chapter 6. There is a minor miracle comparatively. 2 Kings chapter 6. Turning there now. Got my little bookmarks. All right. It's verses 3-7. So then one of them said, "Won't you please come with your servants?" "I will," Elisha replied, and he went with them. They went to the Jordan and began to cut down trees. As one of them was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water. "Oh my Lord," he cried out, "it was borrowed." How many of us have been there? The man of God asked, "Where did it fall?" When he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it there and made the iron float. "Lift it out," he said. Then the man reached out his hand and took it. That is the miracle of an axe head floating. Now, as miracles go, this is not the parting of the Red Sea, which we're going to talk about in a second. It's not, somebody coming back. It's not Lazarus. It's not that. It's the lost keys, right? It's that thing you thought you were never going to see again. And then suddenly there it is, right where you looked before, or what? Recently, it just happened recently. A couple of weeks ago, I lost an earring, and it was not borrowed, but a gift. And I mean, these earrings, they're a gift from my good friend Abrian. The earrings and the necklace, we looked everywhere. I looked in my purse thinking, did it fall in my purse? Nothing. We went back to the restaurant. We walked the streets. We tried everything to find it and couldn't find it. And you know what I did? I prayed. I actually prayed because I did not want to lose one of those earrings. And I got home and I took everything out of my purse. And at first I still didn't see it. And then finally I lifted a stack of stuff that it shouldn't have been under, because keep in mind, it had been in my ear. So how did it get all the way buried underneath some stuff in my purse? But it did. And I found my earring. We can say, oh, that's not a miracle. It's just whatever. That's just you finding something that fell into your purse. Okay, maybe. But then the axhead floating wasn't necessarily a miracle. Or those times that we find something in the place we know we've looked, and then suddenly there it is. We can say that's not a miracle. And then it becomes subjective, right? If you can't acknowledge that something that wasn't there before that is now there, or something that was lost is now found, is part of a miracle, okay, you can't acknowledge it. I can acknowledge it, especially when I know how hard I looked. So for me, that was a minor miracle. Those things happen all the time. There are times I pray for a parking space. I'm going someplace and it's one of those places where they say you'll never find parking. Don't even try to find parking. Parking does not exist. And I'm like, okay, Lord, I need a parking space. And I pull up and there's one right in front of the door. Okay, maybe not a miracle, but somebody else would have said, don't include that axe head in the Bible. Like, that's too little. That's not a big enough deal to put in the Bible. But somebody wanted us to know that even those little things, those minor things, can be miracles as well. So let's take a look at some of the bigger miracles. Oh, my phone is ringing. I'm just going to have to let it ring. I can't get to it from here. It's too far away. But I will say to my sister, if oh, you're on your phone, so it wouldn't be easy for you to text. Okay, it's okay. It's our sweet love calling me, so they can wait. You know, when you think about miracle punishments, I'm going to read from number 16. And then I'm going to read from Exodus 14. But in number 16, I was reading this today, and oh boy, it was one of those woo child ones. So there was some stuff going on, and you know, happens in so many organizations where I'm not happy with who's leading. Therefore, I'm gonna do a whole thing, and you know, I mean, it's Lucifer all over again. It's, you know, we see it even in heaven. So look at chapter 16 of Numbers. It's not very long, but it's incredibly powerful. So I'm going to start. This had to do with Moses, and they were tired of Moses leading. It's really what had happened. So in verse 3, it says, they came as a group to oppose Moses and Aaron and said to them, you have gone too far. The whole community is holy, every one of them, and the Lord is with them. Why then do you set yourselves above the Lord's assembly? And again, doesn't that remind you of Lucifer? Like, I'm an angel, I got powers, I got music in my chest. Why you get to be God? Same kind of spirit behind it. It's just interesting. When Moses heard this, he fell face down. Then he said to Korah, that's who came, and all his followers, because see, he's got his posse with him, right? We're challenging you and your authority. That's what we're going to do, is we're challenging you and your authority. So he said to Korah and all his followers, in the morning, the Lord will show who belongs to him and who is holy, and he will have that person come near him. The man he chooses, he will cause to come near him. You, Korah, and all your followers are to do this. Take censers, and tomorrow put fire and incense in them before the Lord. The man the Lord chooses will be the one who is holy. You Levites have gone too far. And keep in mind, that's what he said to him. You've gone too far. So Korah says to him, you've gone too far. And now Moses is saying to Korah, you Levites have gone too far. Moses also said to Korah, now listen, you Levites, calling names. Isn't it enough for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the rest of the Israelite community and brought you near himself to do the work at the Lord's tabernacle and to stand before the community and minister to them? He has brought you and all your fellow Levites near himself, but now you are trying to get the priesthood too. Still not enough, right? It is against the Lord that you and all your followers have banded together. Who is Aaron that you should grumble against him? Then Moses summoned Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab. But they said, we will not come. Isn't it enough that you have brought us up out of a land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the desert? And now you also want to lord it over us? Moreover, people don't say moreover very often. You haven't brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey or given us an inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you gouge out the eyes of these men? No, we will not come. Then Moses became very angry and said to the Lord, do not accept their offering. I have not taken so much as a donkey from them, nor have I wronged any of them. Moses said to Korah, you and all your followers are to appear before the Lord tomorrow, you and they and Aaron. Each man is to take his censer and put incense in it, 250 censers in all, and present it before the Lord. You and Aaron are to present your censers also. So each man took his censer, put fire and incense in it, and stood with Moses and Aaron at the entrance to the tent of meeting. When Korah had gathered all his followers in opposition to them at the entrance of the tent of meeting, the glory of the Lord appeared to the entire assembly. The Lord said to Moses and Aaron, separate yourselves from this assembly so I can put an end to them at once. Which, it says the Lord said that to Moses and Aaron, which implies that the others couldn't hear it. He's talking to them. Verse 22 says, but Moses and Aaron fell face down and cried out, oh God, God of the spirits of all mankind, will you be angry with the entire assembly when only one man sins? Then the Lord said to Moses, say to the assembly, move away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Moses got up and went to Dathan and Abiram, and the elders of Israel followed him. He warned the assembly, move back from the tents of these wicked men. Do not touch anything belonging to them, or you will be swept away because of all their sins. So they moved away from the tents of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. Dathan and Abiram had come out and were standing with their wives, children, and little ones at the entrances to their tents. Then Moses said, this is how you will know that the Lord has sent me to do all these things and that it was not my idea. If these men die a natural death and experience only what usually happens to men, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord brings about something totally new, and the earth opens its mouth and swallows them with everything that belongs to them, and they go down alive into that grave, then you will know that these men have treated the Lord with contempt. As soon as he finished saying all this, the ground under them split apart, and the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them with their households and all Korah's men and all their possessions. They went down alive into the grave with everything they owned. The earth closed over them and they perished and were gone from the community. At their cries, all the Israelites around them fled, shouting, the earth is going to swallow us too. And fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men who were offering the incense. Okay. Now, that's a rough thing. But we look at it, and to me, it's a miracle, because he says this is what the Lord's going to do. It's an intervention, like we talked about. This is an extraordinary event manifesting divine intervention in human affairs. We could read about an earthquake today, and then, I don't know, 15, 20, 100 years later say, yeah, there was a whole situation that we didn't even know about at the time going down in whatever country, city, land, whatever, and the earth opened up and swallowed them. if we could call that, we could call that a miracle. When the Red Sea parted, and you read about that in Exodus 14, I don't even have to read the whole Exodus. Just listen to this part. Exodus 14, verses 10 through 28, just a little bit. As Pharaoh approached, the Israelites looked up, and there were the Egyptians marching after them. They were terrified and cried out to the Lord. They said to Moses, "Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us to the desert to die?" These people, I tell you the truth. It got such smart mouths. Good grief. Didn't we say to you in Egypt, leave us alone, let us serve the Egyptians? It would have been better for us to serve the Egyptians than to die in the desert. Moses answered the people, "Do not be afraid. Stand firm, and you will see the deliverance the Lord will bring you today. The Egyptians you see today you will never see again. The Lord will fight for you. You need only to be still." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Why are you crying out to me? Tell the Israelites to move on. Raise your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea to divide the waters so that the Israelites can go through the sea on dry ground. I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians so that they will go in after them, and I will gain glory through Pharaoh and all his army, through his chariots and his horsemen. The Egyptians will know that I am the Lord when I gain glory through Pharaoh, his chariots, and his horsemen." And then, you should read this because I don't know if you guys hear about this part. Then the angel of God, who had been traveling in front of Israel's army, withdrew and went behind them. The pillar of cloud also moved from in front and stood behind them, coming between the armies of Egypt and Israel. Throughout the night, the cloud brought darkness to the one side and light to the other. So neither went near the other all night long. It's powerful. Then, as we know, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and all that night the Lord drove the sea back with a strong east wind and turned it into dry land. The waters were divided, and the Israelites went through the sea on dry ground with a wall of water on their right and on their left. The Egyptians pursued them, and all Pharaoh's horses and chariots and horsemen followed them into the sea. During the last watch of the night, the Lord looked down from the pillar of fire and cloud at the Egyptian army and threw it into confusion. He made the wheels of their chariots come off so that they had difficulty driving. And the Egyptians said, "Let's get away from the Israelites. The Lord is fighting for them against Egypt." Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea so that the waters may flow back over the Egyptians and their chariots and horsemen." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and at daybreak, the sea went back to its place. The Egyptians were fleeing from it, and the Lord swept them into the sea. The water flowed back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the entire army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. Now, if you guys remember, there were two major tsunamis some years ago. One was in Japan, and it set off a nuclear reactor. They said this, they said the tsunami did. So there was a great big earthquake in the ocean that caused a tsunami that set off the nuclear reactor. But that wasn't even the biggest tsunami. There was one that was bigger than that in another country. It starts with an SU, but it wasn't something I was really familiar with. Science gives us explanation of things that are biblical. And Jean, I see you over there thinking. I'm going to tell you what it was because I have it pulled up. The biggest one was actually Sumatra. It says the unexpected disaster was neither the largest nor the deadliest earthquake and tsunami to strike this century. That record goes to the 2004 Banda Aceh earthquake and tsunami in Sumatra, a magnitude 9.1, which killed more than 230,000 people. Now, if somebody's chronicling our right now times, but we have science that we can call it. So we can call it a tsunami. If we were chronicling the Red Sea parting and what happened with our knowledge now of science and tsunamis, we would call that a tsunami. And we might not say it was a miracle. We would just add some science to it. This is what that was. But we don't know. We weren't there. We don't know what happened in Japan. We don't know what happened in Sumatra. We don't know what went before those tsunamis, earthquakes. We don't know. But if we were writing about it now, in hindsight, we might call that a modern day miracle, the punishment kind. Now, what I didn't read, because I didn't finish it, that whole story of Korah and all of that, the people who ran after, let me see if I can see, when after Korah was swallowed up, that's like an earthquake there. After that happened, it says, it was bad. I'm trying to see where it says it's going to happen. Lord said to Moses, get away from this assembly. This is in verse 44 and 45. Get away from this assembly so I can put an end to them at once. And they fell face down. And in 46, it says, then Moses said to Aaron, take your censer and put incense in it, along with the fire from the altar, and hurry to the assembly to make atonement for them. Wrath has come out from the Lord. The plague has started. So Aaron did as Moses said and ran into the midst of the assembly. The plague had already started among the people, but Aaron offered the incense and made atonement for them. He stood between the living and the dead, and the plague stopped. But 14,700 people died from the plague, in addition to those who had died because of Korah. You start talking about plagues, and we are in the middle of a pandemic. And I just wonder, 100 years from now, how we'll write about it. 200 years, 1,000 years, how will we write about COVID? Based on what we're doing, the wars and the ugliness and the racism and the sexism and the cruelty and the human trafficking and not taking care of the poor and the needy and the hungry, what will we write about the plague of 2020? Will it just be something we talk about like, oh yeah, it happened 100 years ago in 1914 or what, like, will it be, or 1919? I think that's when we start talking about it. Will it be just spoken of in scientific terms? Or will there be something that talks about, when the world had done this, that, and the other, God sent a plague and X many people died. And then when you look at the different countries and what was going on, will it be looked at that way? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't know. The last scripture is just 2 verses or 3 verses. It's in Joshua. It's a huge thing. And of course, they have scientifically determined that it happened because science tries to explain the supernatural, which makes sense. But in Joshua chapter 10, verses 12 through 14, on the day the Lord gave the Amorites over to Israel, Joshua said to the Lord in the presence of Israel, O sun, stand still over Gibeon. O moon, over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun stood still and the moon stopped till the nation avenged itself on its enemies, as it is written in the book of Jashar. The sun stopped in the middle of the sky and delayed going down about a full day. There has never been a day like it before or since, a day when the Lord listened to a man. Surely the Lord was fighting for Israel. If you look up some scientific stuff, you'll find that they've, in terms of our calendar and how that all works out, they've determined that there really was a time, looking at the calendar, where the days don't line up like they should, and they recognize that there was a delay or some kind of something. The sun didn't go down, the day was twice as long as it should have been, all of that. There are scientific studies that talk about that. So that's a huge miracle. I mean, I know my baby, they talk about the types of miracles. It says control over nature. My baby has the ability to call it to snow and to stop raining. And since birth, since little, it's amazing. It's just amazing. There are things that we can do over weather, that he's given us the ability to either call on ourselves or to ask him to do, and he does. And so it's just so, it's powerful. So I was thinking about those things, those types of miracles, good and bad ones, and our world today, like I said, COVID and tsunamis. But then there are other things that are miracles that we hear about. In 2019, there's something called, and many of you have heard about it, foreign accent syndrome, where somebody is in a coma, and when they wake up, they speak another language or have an accent. It is a medically diagnosed thing called foreign accent syndrome. They cannot explain it. It's not based on where that person has traveled or the accent that they've heard. It's not based on that. And so, just knowing that that is a real thing, that's a miracle. I don't know where that comes from. Those are things that happen today. There is, in 2019, there was a woman, Audrey Showman. She was resurrected after a 6-hour cardiac arrest. She was dead for 6 hours. And then she was resurrected. And she's still alive and doing well today. She considers it a miracle, as do the doctors. There were 2 people. Jermaine, he was paralyzed and he walked again. The doctor said he never would, and he suddenly did. First time he started walking, then half of his body, about a couple of months later, got paralyzed again. And then he was at his church on Easter and didn't even know he had gotten up out of his wheelchair and was walking and praying until he turned around and saw his empty wheelchair and realized he was walking. And when he got to his doctor, they were like, you're walking. And he said, it's a miracle. And the doctor said, that's the only way I can describe it. There was another woman in 2005 who woke up after 27 years in a coma. And again, the doctor said they could only describe it as a miracle. That's all they could do. There was another healing. The Catholic Church does assessments of miracles. And recently they declared that there was a miracle of a healing where they called, this boy had a bad skin disorder or stomach disorder, I think it was. He kept throwing up, violently throwing up all day long. And I think that's what it was. And they prayed over him and they called on one of the names of a nun. And I think the nun was deceased. And as soon as they did, his vomiting stopped. And the Catholic Church has assessed it, all the priests and whatnot, and they have declared that, yes, it was an actual miracle, because they look at criteria like, can it be explained away by medical means or scientific means or anything like that? They realized it cannot, and they declared it a miracle. There are things like that all the time. When you think about deliverance from imminent danger, how many of you have been delivered from imminent danger? You know, a car that nearly hits you, or an accident that should have killed you. My friend Roman, we look at the aftermath of the accident he was in. They couldn't believe he lived and is walking and talking, living to talk about it. That's a miracle. I remember my Aunt Trudy, and my sister will remember this. She jumped out of her shoes. A car was about to hit her, and somehow she came out of her shoes and was on the sidewalk, and only her shoes remained, and the car kind of went over her shoes, but she would have been hit. Gina, I don't know if you remember that situation. But, thinking about imminent danger and being delivered from imminent danger, or, there's so many things. There's so many modern day miracles where, like I said, I see them on the reels and on TikToks and things like that, where they're showing an accident, and then they show like a car that's been crumpled up to like 3 inches. And they're like, can you believe this person walked away from this? And it's unbelievable that she or he walked away. So there are so many different types of miracles that happen every single day, whether they're miracles of nature, miracles in resurrections, as we read about or heard about, or faith healings, things like that, and deliverance from imminent danger. So miracles happen every single day. And if you count, like I said, tsunamis and things like that, well, we've got things like, the Red Sea being parted all the time, as well as the aftermath of that, which is then it's no longer parted and it kills a bunch of people. So it's just interesting that there are so many different miracles going on all the time. I don't know where my sister is. Where are you, sister? I'm gonna unpin myself and see if I can put it in gallery view. Hi, sister. Can you unmute yourself?
Yes, I just arrived home. I'm getting out of my car.
Oh, it looks pretty where you are.
It's lovely. It's a beautiful day.
Do you remember Aunt Trudy telling us about that time where she almost was hit by the car?
Yes, vaguely. Yes, her jumping out of her shoes sounds familiar. That, you know, that's biblical.
Yeah.
Jumping out of your shoes, dancing out of your clothes, jumping out of your shoes.
Right.
That's a thing. Mm-hmm.
Anyway, yeah, that story that I read in Numbers, were you familiar with it? Where, because, you know, they talk about earthquakes in the Bible and they don't record that one as the first earthquake. They have some way later. But to me, if the ground opens up and swallows you whole, I would probably consider that like an earthquake, but I guess it doesn't have to be. It could be a sinkhole, right?
It could, but you know, they don't usually then close right back up. I mean, you know,
that's
it's
true.
still kind of a miraculous earthquake.
Yeah,
You know, the
no matter
timing,
what.
I think the timing of these things is critical, right? I mean, I think most things could be written off as, well, there's some natural phenomenon that is similar to that thing. We could call it blah, blah, blah. But when the timing is like, okay, here's the deal. Y'all get across, hold your hand up, and then everybody who's wrong, you know, the water's going to cover them back up. Okay. That seems awfully coincidental.
Right. Yeah, you know, and again, with those other major tsunamis, I have no idea what was going on there. I mean, we don't hear about that part. Like if there were, like we wouldn't even know if there were, let's say, 20,000 human trafficked women and they were all praying and they all got across on their boat that they were trying to kidnap them on. And then, you know, then the tsunami happened and all the rest of them died. We wouldn't even know necessarily. We wouldn't even know. That could actually be the case and we wouldn't know. Except for maybe when somebody, maybe there is somebody who's written it down somewhere on what that was. I mean, we hear about a lot of things like, you know, birds falling out of the sky and, you know, locusts and we hear about things that sound like biblical plagues. And with animals or insects or, you know, things like that, we hear about things that sound like tsunamis and like the parting of the Red Sea, and we don't know the backstory. Just as I can imagine that the people who weren't there with Moses and the Israelites, they wouldn't have necessarily known the backstory of what was going on. They'd just be like, oh, we heard a bunch of Egyptians drowned in the sea. And so similarly, that's how it would be communicated to us about the tsunamis of today in Japan and Sumatra. That's how we would hear about it. But, you know, somebody on the site or, you know, who wrote it down or whatever, or if God says, let me tell you what actually happened, and then they wrote that down, then we'd find out. So I find it interesting. To me, miracles are all around us. If you see them, if you notice them, if you choose to believe them, and if you don't choose to believe them, there's nothing that anybody can do to convince you that they exist.
You know, I think we see that in a lot of things, right? We believe what we want to believe. And if we choose not to believe something, then there's no amount of proof. We will deny our lying eyes if we decide it's not what we want to believe.
Yeah, special effects, but they're right in front of you still. Special effects, it's fake news.
Fake news. Fake news. Yep, exactly. Photoshop.
Photoshop, right. Standing in front of you for Photoshop.
Yep,
yeah.
Photoshop.
Yeah.
Yep, Photoshop magic. What they can do nowadays.
Yeah. Anyway. Well, thank you for being here tonight, sister. Did you have any other comments you wanted to share before I get ready to sign off of YouTube? Other than,
I guess I don't understand the impulse to limit infinite greatness. You know what I mean? The creator, whoever managed to create all of this, and it seems just impossible to me that this could just all be a happy accident. That just doesn't. That's like not even a logical thing. But whoever had the ability to create all of this, people who then want to say, but yeah, but that doesn't. This can't. This, that's not. And I always think, we use only like a third of our brain. There's a whole part of our brain that we don't even understand what it's for and what it can do, and yet we limit ourselves. We limit what can happen based on our own experience, our current experience. I remember the thing that you shared with us about, and granted, obviously not reality, but two babies in the womb discussing what it was going to be like when they got out, and the one baby was like, and I hear, we're going to breathe air into our lungs. And it was like, what? That's not even realistic, and we're going to be able to see light. That's just, based on a very limited reality. And we don't remember what happened before we were born. We don't know what's going to happen when we die. Half the stuff that happens in the world, we don't fully understand. It's taken us 2.5 years to even start to get our arms around the virus. It's like, there's so much unknown, and yet there's so much certainty. We have the certainty of a 2-year-old. Okay, well,
right.
So I tend to feel that there are many things that I can only say I have not experienced that, but I can't put it in the bucket of therefore
it doesn't exist.
It doesn't exist,
right?
Because I have experienced all things. So
right,
there's just an arrogance there that is kind of unbelievable.
It's so arrogant. It's when I teach on diversity topics and I talk about people black or white or minority or non-minority who decide to say racism doesn't exist because I've never experienced it. Like
yeah,
that's not how that works.
Yep. So
I always give the example of that woman who comes in battered and beaten, and she says my husband did this to me and he's never beat me up. So
right, there you go.
Right.
Therefore, it's not my experience with him. Mm-hmm. Not my experience with him. So yeah, exactly. And yeah, and so I can't even conceive of the fact that might have happened.
Yep.
Can't just beyond belief. Which we typically don't believe women anyway. I mean that's a thing. That's a real thing. But yeah, things that are beyond our understanding.
It's beyond our understanding.
And yeah, but we're going to limit them. We put limits on them. So yeah, that was one of the things. I love the Lutheran Church. That was the church that I came to the Lord in, and it has such good theology in so many ways. But there are some parts of the Lutheran Church that are cessationists, and they believe that the gifts of the Holy Spirit died with the last apostle. And that just strikes me as, wait, what? What do you? So they don't believe in tongues, they don't believe in healing, and they don't believe in all those gifts of the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, why would an infinite being be limited by a human death somehow? It just doesn't make any sense to me. But I think it's their way of controlling the spooky,
Right.
And
so. Yeah.
Even among Christians, there's that.
Oh, still
that impulse. Yes.
Yeah. Honestly, and I mean, there are some miracles that Jesus did. If he did them today, they'd be calling it, man, nothing but the devil.
Well, yes.
That's
so exactly right. They wouldn't admit it, but yes,
no,
yes,
they would think, no, I wouldn't. Yeah, you would.
Yes,
yeah,
they made God in their own image. So yeah, there are a lot of things right now that if Jesus came here and did, they would think, heathen, immigrant, you know, anti-American, you know,
Exactly, all of it. You know,
mm,
non-Republican, non-Democrat, yeah, they put every label on
mhm, exactly. And none of them good. So,
'em. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to Miracles in the Bible and in the Modern Day World. And if you've experienced a miracle in modern day world that you're willing to share, please drop it in the chat underneath the YouTube video. I'd love to hear about it. They are inspiring, and I believe in miracles. I've experienced my own. I've had angels and miracles happen with me. I'm a walking miracle anyway, so you know I completely get miracles. And so when I hear people say they don't exist, I'm like, well, then I'm invisible. So because I am an absolute walking miracle. So anyway, all right, great to see everyone. I'm gonna log off of YouTube.